Julia Rock, the reporter at levernews.com. Julia's Twitter handle is JUL1AROCK or at levernews, and levernews.com, of course. And Julia, I have all that right?
Yes, you have all that right. And
okay.
Thanks so much for having me on.
Sure. Welcome to the program, or welcome back to the program. So I don't think Ted Budd is like a household name, like Ted Cruz. But he is the Republican candidate for the United States Senate in North Carolina. And he's got a really interesting past with regard to the banking industry. Tell us about this.
Yeah, so to your point, this is a race that's been sort of covered as a boring race, but it's one of the closest Senate elections between Ted Budd and Cheri Beasley in North Carolina. And Budd, who has been in the House of Representatives since 2017, has really gone to bat on behalf of banks, helping boost a merger that the largest bank merger after the financial crisis, as well as helping banks bypass state interest rate laws in order to charge consumers much higher interest rates on loans than is normally allowed under state law.
So is this just another example of, the Supreme Court changing the rules of the game, striking down nearly 1,000 good government laws with a series of Buckley, Bellotti, Citizens United with these decisions, and, basically legalizing political bribery. And now we've got basically people who have no scruples, people who are perfectly willing to take bribes from big corporations and dance to their tune in exchange for power and wealth. Is that what's going on here?
I think you're right that it's another example of that, although I've done a lot of money in politics reporting, and this Budd story really stood out to me because what you see is Budd sending letters to the regulators that, regulate the banks and enforce consumer protection laws, making asks of them that bank lobbyists have been pushing for, and then money flowing into his campaign coffers, within days or weeks of him sending these letters. And as you point out, this is a huge problem that exists in our political system that's been enabled by Citizens United. But Budd's work on behalf of the banks really stood out to me.
Citizens United just opened a garage door here. I mean, it opened the gate to the city, as it were, for dark money to flow into politics. But given that, there are still some restrictions, and there still are bribery laws, arguably. Is anything that Ted Budd has done cross that line, in your opinion, or is he operating within the constraints of Citizens United?
My reporting certainly didn't look at any cases where he might have broken campaign finance laws, but I think you're absolutely right to focus on Citizens United, which basically unleashed massive amounts of outside spending that's supposed to not be coordinated with campaigns. And indeed, one of his biggest backers over the past couple of election cycles, including in the Senate race, is Club for Growth, which is this massive pro-Wall Street super PAC that has just been pouring money not only into Budd's primary to help him win the Republican primary, but now into this general election.
Yeah, this is one of the early creations of the Koch network, isn't it? Club for Growth?
Yes, it is.
Yeah. So how is Ted Budd's campaign dealing with this? Are he or Cheri Beasley talking about this? Or is he just running the normal ads of, Democrats evil, they want to drink children's blood, vote for me, or whatever?
It's exactly the latter that you just described. And in fact, Club for Growth, which, as you point out, is this Koch-affiliated, anti-regulation, anti-government group, is running attack ads against his opponent for an issue that's just completely unrelated to any economic issue. Most of what's, been discussed on the campaign trail has been, important issues like abortion, which, Budd has opposed abortion rights, and Budd voted to overturn the results of the 2020 election, which are indeed important issues. But his work, on behalf of the banks and the financial industry hasn't really come up, even though that is the industry that has really been helping to bankroll his campaign.
Do you see any evidence that the Beasley campaign is going to pick up on this?
We haven't seen any ads yet that are going after him for this particular issue. This is a race where the Democrats were pretty late to the game in terms of spending. As of the beginning of October, I think the GOP super PAC was spending basically double what the Democrats were. And then polls a few weeks ago showed that Beasley and Budd were actually basically in a dead heat. And so the Democrats are starting to catch up a little bit. So maybe we'll see some ads. I would hope that touch on, Budd's work for the financial industry, because it has really important impacts, for people in North Carolina. This bank merger that he boosted led to tons of branch closures and layoffs in North Carolina. And his work for the banks to be able to bypass state interest rate laws, if he had been successful, could have cost North Carolinians like $500 million.
Wow. So I don't know how close you are to the average voter in North Carolina. You're an out-of-state reporter, I believe. You don't live in North Carolina. Do you have any sense of how North Carolina voters are responding to all this?
So I don't quite have a sense of how people have been responding to our reporting necessarily from what we've heard, but I do know that there's been, based on local media reports, there's been some frustration in North Carolina that the national press has sort of avoided the race or written about it as sort of a boring, uninteresting election, when in fact the winner in the race could not only decide, who holds the Senate based on how the election goes, but also have really important impacts for people in North Carolina.
Right. Are you seeing more, and are the Democrats coming to the rescue, Sherry Beasley?
Well, we'll see if it's too little too late, but the Democratic Senate super PAC has increased its spending in the race, and so we'll see if that makes a difference in the end. But again, it's basically a dead heat, so it sort of seems like it could. I don't know how much to trust polling. I think I'm generally pretty skeptical, but it does seem like this race could still go either way. Yeah, it's pretty amazing stuff here. Julia Rock, reporter with Lever News. LeverNews.com is the website. JUL1AROCK on Twitter, or Lever News on Twitter. Julia, thanks for dropping by. Thanks so much for having me. My pleasure, and thanks for doing this great reporting.